So, since the airline AA5 is done and dusted, it's time I moved on to yet another one that's been taking up space on my shelf for a while. This is a Firestone 4A27, or no, sorry, 4A3. No, 4A27. Got confused there. Now, while it may say Firestone on the paper dial there, and yes, that is Firestone Tire and Rubber, they did actually sell radios, among other things, in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and even a portable television set, among other stuff. Of course, like a lot of other big name brands that sold stuff like this, they only put their name on it. They were not responsible for the manufacturing. This particular radio, I've seen the cabinet before, was probably made by Belmont. And Firestone used a number of different companies, Stewart Warner being one of them. I have a set that uses a Stewart Warner chassis, very well built. But this is a very cheap tabletop AA5, and it's small. I mean, look at that. This thing is absolutely minuscule. But the tuning is all nice and free. It still has the knobs, and someone tried giving it kind of a, I don't know, hot rod paint job. I don't know how I feel about this two-tone business. It looks good on some sets, but this one's kind of on the plain side of things, so I might just redo it in full white. But I'll have a look online and see what the original colors were. But we're just going to go ahead and get inside it and see what there is. Now, this did not have any screws holding the chassis in as it is. The back panel is hanging on by a thread because the original attachment means, which are these little push clips, well, someone pulled too hard on the back and damaged the cardboard around the edges, so the push tabs are still there, but they're not holding it in place. And they're these little gizmos tucked up in here that are T-shaped, and they expand slightly when you press them in. They get a little tighter. But if we look at the back panel here, we've got a tube layout, and this is a good old-fashioned 5-tube octal setup. So we've got a 35Z5 rectifier, and let's see, 50L6 power output, 12SA7, I'm going to take a guess and say is the mixer oscillator tube, 12SK7, either a detector or the IF amplifier, something like that. Doesn't really matter. The cord's been cut off a long time ago, so yay. No one's been fiddling with this for a while. And we're going to give it a slight nudge with the knobs here to get it out. And then lift it the rest of the way, and there we go. And interestingly, I just now noticed the inside of the cabinet has a stamp in it. If you look in there, it says MFP Company. No idea who that is, but it's obvious when they sprayed the cabinet, and it looks like they only sprayed it pure white, just like the last one I was working on. And there is a decent sized chip out of the bottom there. I may try rebuilding that the way I did on the airline, since I know that that works. However, this area is going to take a little more doing because of the shape and because of that rib that goes right down the middle there where the chassis was supposed to screw into it, so I don't know how that's going to work. But the cabinet's not the important thing right now. We need to see how hard it's going to be to get this thing up and running, and if I even still have the parts to do so after having worked on the last few sets. I do actually run out of components, believe it or not. Alright, get the lens flipped around here. And there's really not much to this thing. I've already been in here. This one edge of the chassis, I was hitting it with a little bit of semichrome polish. See, the loop antenna is still intact. It's nice to have that because the loop is usually tuned to the first stage in the set, and I'd like to have that instead of trying to figure it out myself. And we are missing one tube here, the 50L6, and I think I know where that, hold on, no, I apologize, this is the 50L6, that goes in that empty socket there. The tube that's missing is the 12SQ7, and I might have that. Oh, I may not have that. duds. And a 6AU5, and what looks like another 6SN7. Yeah, I'm guessing someone probably stole that tube out of the socket, so that is unfortunate. So I won't be able to get it running immediately unless I can find the 12SQ7 just kind of kicking around. I really don't think I have one. But everything else is here, and let's go ahead and turn it around so I can show you the front. This really is pretty diminutive. We've got our little dial scale. There's no lamp behind it. It's just it's literally just a piece of paper, which I'm guessing is probably a brighter red than it is now. The tuning still works nice and smooth, although the plastic lens up here has gotten cloudy. I have tried polishing these before, haven't had any success. I've heard that some people have. I'm not going to chance it. Now what's neat is a lot of these tubes, or at least the 50L6 and the 12SA7 here, are actually branded for Firestone. Firestone used Kenrad as their supplier, and then got them to put their brand name on there, and Firestone's line of radios were dubbed the Air Chief. Montgomery Ward's had the airline sets, and then there was Sky Patrol and a whole bunch of, there's a whole slew of other companies that had different names. Looks like the rectifier is a Ward's airline, so that's been replaced. And I would imagine that this guy over here has also been swapped at some point. 12SK7, yeah, this is a Delco tube. So that's just a straight replacement. Well, this set probably got used quite a bit. These little tabletop sets are probably put in kitchens or in other little rooms and just kind of sat there and played all day long. Alright, so let's see what we got going under here. I have not done anything electrically to this set, but it is obvious that somebody else has been fiddling around. You can see right now this giant replacement Sprague electrolytic here, this 2-section. This is very, very new. Usually when I look at a set, the first thing I try to identify is if anyone has done any replacement parts. And you can usually tell the era by the construction once you've looked at enough of them. So these multi-section capacitors here, like the Sprague Atom, the artwork on it is still very bright and very legible. The leads are still, the rubber on the leads is extremely flexible and pliable still. If this was, from the 30s, say, the rubber would be so brittle that it would be cracking apart and falling off in your hands. And well, the other thing is obvious is that they didn't bother attaching this. These capacitors were designed to be screwed in place to the chassis. And I'm guessing that the original, well, they might have just had 2 discrete capacitors installed in here. That would have been my guess, but multi-sections are pretty common for these sets. And then down here we have these 2 guys. These are also Sprague parts. That's also a dead giveaway. Name brand company like Sprague. Normally what you're going to see are like, you would see Sprague, Aerovox is another one. There were some Sprague Atoms put in here. Sometimes you'll just get off-brand or no-name parts. These guys here are, does that say Amco? Yeah. Lowest bidder components, I guess. But there's not much of anything in here. You've got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and yes, this is a capacitor. It may look like a giant resistor with these funky color codes here, but this is actually a capacitor. Sprague actually made a line of caps they're referred to as bumblebees, or I think they also call them black beauties, that are a black body with a color code on them that it works just the same way as a resistor, multiplier, first and second digits and all that crap, and then a tolerance band. But I absolutely abhor working with these because after a while the paint code becomes illegible, or what they figure orange and yellow could be differentiated by was sometimes pretty crappy. I still have that problem with resistors today. I just get out a freaking meter and check them, or I have my handy cheater's guide here that has a bunch of little color wheels that I can rotate and get an idea what I should be looking for. But for these, the easiest thing to do is, since it's a name brand set, you're more than likely going to find a schematic set for it on a website like Nostalgia Air or radiomuseum.org. Probably have it. But yeah, what do we got for filters? This is a dual 150 microfarad, a dual 50 microfarad, 150 volt DC cap, and yeah, there's nothing more to it really. 0.01. That's a 0.05. I think I'm fresh out of 0.05s. Now, I'm not sure what's going on here, but someone stuck a resistor to this tube socket and never got around to soldering anything. It's just kind of sitting in there. In fact, just get rid of it. Obviously, someone didn't really bother taking the time to do that. If something was attached there, we'll have to check the schematic and make sure we can make the necessary repairs. I'm goofing with it, but there's some serious ugly solder blobs and junk in here if I can get that closer. Absolutely atrocious solder work. This looks like a fairly hurried repair. They just didn't wait for it to heat up all the way. Yeah, it just sucks. Yeah, but it happens. And then besides the ones we've got tucked underneath the bottom here, the antenna actually has a pair of capacitors all its own. We've got these back here. Oh, this is a Solar. Solar is another brand you'll see. And looks like there used to be something else hooked up here, but that is long gone. Another capacitor maybe. Leads are twisted together. So this guy is a 0.1. We've got a great big solder blob on the chassis for the ground, and we've got a, what is this? 0.01. So yeah, that sort of thing should be a snap to deal with, and we've just got the one connection here. We've got a connection going through the antenna and all that. I may actually disconnect the antenna from the chassis so that I can work on cleaning just this up. Yeah, there's not much more to really talk about there. I need to just clean the chassis up and then start going through all the replacement parts. So yeah, I'll look around, see what I can find, and try dredging up whatever components I need to start on the chassis. And then we'll get this removed, and I'll start going through and cleaning this up. So while I've got a bit of free time, I decided to get back to work on my Firestone 4A27 AA5 set that I've got. Little fella with the red and white cabinet here. And I'm almost done with the underside work, except that partway through finishing it up I realized I had made a bit of a goof. When installing the new polarized power cord, I was checking the connections for the hot wire, and I went and I put the hot wire in the switch circuit, thinking, oh yeah, that's the safest place to put it, isolation, all that jazz. Well, as it turns out, no, that is actually not the safest place to put it, because the circuit is actually connected to ground through the switch. Although, now that I think about it, maybe that's not such a bad thing. And see, that's one of the caveats with working with these AA5s. If I connect the hot wire through the filament string first, then with the filament string having no current flowing through it, the chassis will be hot. But then if you have it put through the switch, the chassis won't technically be hot until you turn the switch on, so that is the safer of the two options. Which means I just disconnected my leads for no reason. Alright, well, barring that mistake, I'll just go ahead and put it back the way I had it, but I'm also under here because I needed to add one last thing. Whatever was in here last did some fiddling around with the rectifier tube socket, and they actually made some bad component substitutions. Values were way off what they should have been. So I went back in and I put in the correct resistor values. But the other thing was the plate of the rectifier actually passes through a 27 ohm resistor, and that resistor had been removed, and there was just some stuff dangling off the socket at that point. So I have a replacement 1 watt. The parts list actually specifies a half watt part in that area, which I find surprising. Apparently there must not be a lot of plate current being drawn in this particular scenario. But regardless of that, we're going to go ahead and put in a little slightly higher rated component that can take the abuse, and then we'll get the power switch and all this hopefully put back in there. We have to finagle a little bit to get it back into the switch holes. And then the last two things to do to this are to put new capacitor connections to the antenna. There's a 0.1 and a 0.01 on the top at the back, and they're grounded through a giant solder blob, so I'm going to try and use my Weller heat gun to get that all put together. And then I managed to get a pair of replacement tubes today. The 12SK7 and 12SQ7 were dead. Well, actually, the 12SK7 was just totally missing. 12SK7 was dead. So we got those back in there. And go ahead and try to feed this back into its hole. It may not be so easy. The wiring is frayed out pretty good. I may actually have to cut it, start over. Yeah, this is what you get when you second guess yourself. You wind up having to do the same work over again. Try to get it right the first time. Don't be like me. And there we go. Now before we solder that up, this is actually the other end where the 27 ohm guy is supposed to go. So we'll go ahead and get that carefully looped in there. Its other terminal is just tucked up underneath here. And we'll just go ahead and put that right across the middle. And then we'll poke it through this guy right there. Not a lot of space in here to work with. A5s are probably not my favorite sets to recap, or to do any kind of maintenance on for that matter, but they are the most common, and they are at the very least simple. Not a lot of parts, and they don't contain any of the more expensive 400 plus volt capacitors you would normally run into on a typical 30s or normal transformer set. Soldered in there, and just to clarify, it is pin 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the bottom, 1 is over here, and 8 is over here. Get the power cord connections soldered in there. There we go. Awesome. Do a little bit of cleanup work. Alright, that all looks pretty good. Pull the knot back here for the power cord. Get that tightened up against there. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And so that pretty well finishes up the underside of this little guy. New filter caps, all new film capacitors for all the other stuff, and a new safety cap in circuit. It's all the important bits. And then we can flip her over and take a look at the last two we need to replace here, and I will go and grab some replacements for that. Alright, so we got the power cord dealt with, 27 ohm resistor in, and we're just dealing with the two antenna capacitors. Now I was checking the schematic a little while ago and comparing it to what was there, and we still have the 0.01. That is actually part of the loop circuit. But this solar seal tight right here was rated at 0.1, and I was looking at that going, you know, this is unlike any of the other capacitors in there, different brand. It doesn't look as cheap as the other ones. These are all your pretty typical wax paper deals and nothing special. And I checked the schematic, and sure enough, where the 0.1 was, there was supposed to be a 0.05. So obviously someone just subbed in a value. These values aren't super critical, but I'm not going to take the chance on an incorrect value, and I happen to have another 0.05 in my parts bin. I bought a bunch of 0.047s to make up the difference because they're much cheaper. And I used my heat gun here to get the chassis extremely warm and to melt the giant solder blob that held the original wiring connections on there. Laid some fresh solder down, and I've got the 0.01's lead is actually embedded in the solder up against the chassis, good solid connection, and then I'm using the other end of it as a tie point for this 0.05, as its leads are a little short. I must have pulled it as something else that I had worked on and didn't go anywhere with. So we've got all those set up, and now the fun part is remembering where on this chassis, where on the antenna actually all these connections go, because you've got 4 attachment points. Now, and I do at least know that this is the external antenna connection, which means that somewhere in there there'll be a connection something others. Now I can see that there is actually a cut connection right there, so there was supposed to be a capacitor there. Yeah, that's about all that I can decipher. I'll have to use my multimeter to double check what should go where. And that's just based on the side of the lead that was there. Pretty fair to say that's where the 0.05 is supposed to go, is that terminal there. That actually comes in from all of that, and according to this, that should actually wind up connecting more towards the external antenna. And we'll have to wring that out. Let's grab the multimeter here and take a look. So, alright, so this is supposedly where the 0.05 is supposed to go. This is the external antenna connection. We get about an ohm, maybe? About an ohm. Alright. Now, the farthest point from that should be the other end, presumably. So let's try this. No, we're not getting anything there. Let's try ramping. Huh. Alright, how about here? No? How about here? Okay, well that is definitely interesting, because obviously this has to create a loop. So let's try this here and that there. Okay, so we get practically a dead short through that. Oh, that's going to be confusing. This is why you make sure to take pictures of how things go back together, because when you get stuck like this, you're kind of up shit creek. Well, there are only 3 connections. Oh, no, wait, there are, I suppose there are 4 connections, but one of them actually hosts 2. That solder blob there only appears to use the 0.05, so that would be that guy. That guy and this probably go to the same point. And then you have the 0.01 that ties in to to what appears to be the outermost part of that loop. The schematic is rather confusing in regard to that. I'm going to check my photos and see if I actually bothered to capture that. Alright, so got everything wired back up. In my infinite wisdom, I actually bothered to record enough footage of me playing with the antenna to actually see what capacitors and wires went where. So that is all back together. Now let's make sure that these two aren't making complete contact. That might kill the circuit. There we go. And we'll start by flipping it over and watching the undersides while we slowly power it up on the Variac. See if anything goes wrong. I'm going to turn this off so that I can see the filaments better, so I apologize if the video gets a little worse. Alright, we have filament activity. We're getting noise out of the speaker. Alright. Got it cranked to the max here. Whoop. Looks like we got something there, so let's tip this back up real quick and scoot back.
Electric and drug companies, and of the major means of production such as factories
How about
and
that?
capital, as well as other.
I forgot that the band is a little bit different. I'm used to nothing being down here and everything being over here, but this one actually goes 1600 to 550 rather than 550 to 1600. So,
Nature of communist states such as the Soviet Union. You guys tell me about the subway rules. There's somebody at there's one of these turnstiles you can't jump over. You have to. Oh, we haven't gotten to the good part yet. Go ahead.
Bigger problem. What's he going to do? Go after some of them or not others? There are going to be a couple people on that list who the White House would love to have primaries against, and a couple.
Bracket game? You might be. Challenge. Luckily, there's ESPN Tournament Challenge, the #1 bracket game. Just sign up on ESPN.com/bracket. See, it's easy. Always listen.
and pretty silent down there. Our filter caps aren't warming up, so that's good. Okay, well I wouldn't recommend that sort of a test, but the power switch, even with it in circuit, we're not getting anything through the chassis. The tubes are acting as a load and current's flowing through them, so that's good. And then, when we shut this off, we don't get a buzz or any indication that there is electrical activity from the power cord, so the hot wire is being completely disconnected from the circuit, which is exactly what we want. I'll probably go through there and try aligning it a little bit, adjust the two IF transformers and see if I can't get it a little better, but it seems to pick up all the big stations that we have without any trouble at all. AA5s are nothing if not robust. That's why they made so blasted many of them. So, go ahead and we'll shut all this down. There is a small crack in the speaker cone, a little hairline fracture that I need to very gently patch. So I'll take care of that later. But the next big thing will be to deal with this cabinet here, get all the paint stripped off of it, and then see if we can't do something about that chunk out of the back there missing, see if I can't fill it in a little bit and make it look good. Paint job on this thing is, well, it's pretty crap. In fact, it looks like whoever had it last just painted over what was already there. Didn't really give any effort into actually trying to prep it. And you can see there's actually a few spots on here where the original paint is starting to bleed through. It was entirely white originally, and I haven't decided if I want to try hot rodding this or not. I usually try to go with whatever the original color is, but being that this is a Firestone set rather than having the regular old Belmont name on it, I might try to do Firestone colors. I think those are something to the effect of orange and blue, which might look a little silly on this, but I think if you did it right, it might not actually look all that bad. Maybe Firestone's red and white, I don't know. Either way, if it was done in red and white, I'm pretty sure I could do a considerably better job on the cabinet here than whoever did this did. So, get that all soaked down and ready. Yeah, start cleaning up the cabinet, I guess. Until next time.